Welcome to Inspired Living with Keri Murphy, the podcast, where as your host each and every week, I am going to inspire you and empower you to share your message and step into that big vision you see for yourself. I'll be bringing you celebrity interviews, influencer insights, and my personal tips from decades as an on-camera talent, TV host, media expert, and entrepreneur, so you can build a brilliant seven-figure brand. Because when you're inspired, you inspire others. So let's go. Water that tastes good. A pretty simple concept, right? But for Keri Goldin, it was something that she could not find. Trying to kick her Diet Coke addiction, trying to get healthier, she started to drink water instead of her daily dose of Diet Coke. And within 2 weeks, started feeling better, lost 24 pounds, and also got bored with water. So what did she do? She started slicing up fruit into her water and soon found that she actually liked it. Unsweetened fruit essence. But then the next question came, how do I get it on the shelves? And in this interview, Keri shares with us exactly what she did, how she did it. We talk about her book, Undaunted, which I have just loved reading. Her stories are so wonderful, and she certainly does have an undaunted spirit. But we also talk about how being undaunted doesn't mean that you don't have fear. And we talk about what she did to overcome some of those fears. So if you're in a place in your life where you might be sitting on a great idea, or maybe you want to start a business and you have no idea where to begin, you are going to be inspired and learn some great insight from the CEO and founder of Hint Water, Keri Goldin. Keri, you have no idea how much I have been looking forward to this interview with you. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
I have loved your book. And I will say, as a busy mom with a baby at home and running a business, reading has been a luxury that I have been put on the bookshelf. I mean, literally, you should see the stack of books. And yet I made time to read this book and I absolutely loved it. So I want to start off by what made you write Undaunted? Was it just I have to share my story right now? Or what was it that pulled you? Because I know writing a book is no small endeavor.
Yeah, so I call myself an accidental entrepreneur, but I call myself an accidental author too, because I didn't know I was going to write a book. It was my journal. And I started journaling about 5 years ago and primarily started journaling because I was traveling for business and for Hint and also for speaking engagements. And I found myself, that Q&A at the end when people are asking you different questions,
Sure.
that would be my prompt. And oftentimes I would answer the questions, but then I would go and write that question down and I would force myself to write more and really start to talk more about the stories of how I experienced it or what I thought about it, why I thought it was wrong or inaccurate in some way. And so that was really when I started writing. And frankly, it got to be 600 pages of the journal after, 5 years. And so I was sharing with a friend of mine who was an author. I said, how do I bind this journal and get it out to lots of people? Because I think it could actually help a lot of people that, frankly, the Q&A at the end is most of the time they're questions that I've heard before, but
Sure.
but not always. And I thought those questions, unfortunately, people who are not at these events probably have those questions too, and may actually need to hear the answers to these questions even more so than the people who are able to go to these events. And I think that the challenge for so many people is that they never get started. They never go and become an entrepreneur because the wall's too big, right? Or they have misinformation about what it takes to be a unicorn, right? Or, they think, oh, I've got to have experience in the industry that I want to go into. And then that is what is going to make them successful, or they need to be a fearless risk taker and that they never have fears along the way. So again, I had so much help crowdsourcing this journal in many ways, just because of people who were asking me these questions. And never did I think, like I said, that it would turn into a book, but it did.
Yes, and it's a good one. And I will say for,
Thank you.
the unicorns out there and the people that have these great ideas that actually take themselves out of the game before they even get started because
Mhm.
of the fear of failure, or I don't know enough, or I'm not experienced, or this or that. I mean, your story is such a beautiful example of
Thank
just
you.
really trying to lead a better life for you and your family. I remember the days of Diet Coke, my friend. I
Yeah.
remember at the time I owned a talent agency. It was probably in the 90s. And I remember walking across the street to McDonald's and getting the big gulp of Diet Coke and literally going back and refilling it probably 3 times throughout the day. I have to say, I've been off Diet Coke now for probably, 2 decades, if not longer. But that's really where it started for you. Like you
Mhm.
just wanted to get off the Coke train.
Yeah, absolutely. The story. So prior to starting Hint, I was a tech executive. I ran e-commerce and shopping at America Online. And after 7 years, and I had a small family, small at that time, 3 kids under the age of 4. And
I mean, can we just stop there for a minute? 3 kids under the age of
I
4.
know it was
That
crazy town.
alone, Undaunted could be the, the
Yeah, and
poster of the
after
family.
I think after, leaving early in the morning to take a United flight, then the pilots knew my name. I was on there a lot. I thought this is just weird. I mean, this is just
Yeah.
not normal, and I'm never going to get a chance to go back to these times, right? And so I thought
Mhm.
this is the time to really take that break. And so I took a few years off. I had gained a bunch of weight over the course of my pregnancies. I was excellent at gaining weight. I was terrible at losing weight. And I'd also developed terrible adult acne that I never even had as a teenager, and my energy levels were low. And that's when I really started looking at dieting and eating better. And it ended up that I was actually eating pretty good. I was exercising, all of those things, and had really given up on this idea of dieting. But I did think that it was confusing to consumers. Like, what should they
Yeah,
do? Even
sure.
people were willing to go and try a new one and spend money doing it. But it was just, there was no clear guarantee that it was actually, something great was going to happen. And so that's where my head was. And then I looked down at my Diet Coke, which was my best friend. I mean, I was
Right.
married to Diet Coke forever. And I never really thought about it because it said diet on it.
Well, sure.
And I started
Must be
drinking.
good for you.
Yeah. And I started drinking it when I was in high school. My mom was a tab drinker. And that was, of course, I wasn't going to drink tab. And I started drinking Diet Coke thinking I was doing great because I wasn't drinking full-fledged soda. I was a gymnast. I would bring it to the gym. I just lived on it. And then I saw all the ingredients. And here I had been eliminating ingredients like what was in my Diet Coke in my food, but I thought they're still there in the drink. So maybe I should do a test. And the test is that I'll swap it out for plain water and see what happens. I think day one, I was already complaining that water is so damn boring. And that is why I have not drank water but I said, I'm going to go with it for 2 weeks. I'm going to do it. A couple days later, I was really itching with, the boring thing. And
Yeah.
so I started slicing up fruit. And I think I probably even looked around the room to see whether or not anyone was looking. Like, I think I thought I was cheating a little bit, and I threw it in the water just to get me to continue drinking water. And that's when I realized that that was really all I needed. I didn't need a bunch of other stuff. I just needed water and fruit, and I was going to drink fruit. 2.5 weeks later, I I stuck to it for those 2.5 weeks. And then I realized that my clothes were fitting me super different. People were like, you've lost a lot of weight. Your skin looks great, all of these things. And that was the only change that I had made. I lost 24 pounds in 2.5
Wow.
weeks, which is crazy.
Wow. That is crazy.
And that's when I really thought, okay, this whole diet industry that exists out there. I mean, I just made one simple change and that was it. And like, just by doing one thing, drinking water, and I wanted to make water taste better. So I added fruit, but that was great. And that was all I really needed. And no one, I think people for years told me, oh, you should drink 8 glasses of water a day. And it went in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
But then also the boring factor was critical. I mean, that was a huge deal. And so that's when I really kind of got on this bandwagon and started sharing this with so many of my friends saying, okay, I was drinking Diet Coke and I gave it up. They said, wait, diet? You were drinking diet? And I said, yeah, it ends up the diet is not necessarily healthy. But I didn't know that.
Right?
Who knew that? Right? It
Yeah.
has less calories.
It's like the fat-free craze, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, wait, why don't people know this? And then I went, so I was missing the convenience though of my Diet Coke. I had gotten over the fact that I wasn't going to hear the pop of the can,
Mhm.
but it was, I missed the convenience and I was buying fruit and spending a fortune, but also it went bad after like a day. And so I
Sure.
thought, how do you make this product and get it on the shelf at Whole Foods? So I was shopping in Whole Foods and I just asked a guy that was in the aisle that looked official. It's a little tricky in Whole Foods because it's not like they have a uniform, right? So you're like,
you're
"Do you
like,
work
you're
here?"
stalking out
And
everyone in the Whole Foods.
I'm totally. And I'm like, hey, so how do you get a product on the shelf? And he said, you mean like for sale? And I said, yeah, how do you get a product on the shelf? And he said, you have to have like a label and a bottle. I said, I know that, but I mean,
Like, thanks. Yeah.
is it possible for me to get it on the shelf? And he said, well, you need a UPC code, and Whole Foods, we have this local program. So if your product is locally produced, then you could probably get it on the shelf. And I just was so excited by the idea of getting it on the shelf. Here I was a tech executive, and but I all of a sudden just thought, if I could actually produce this product and help people understand that the diet industry is not really, you know, what I thought it was, and probably
Right.
what many other people thought it was, then I could help a lot of other people. And that was really where my head was, that every day I would wake up and just be curious and just thought, I don't know. You know how sometimes you have like a dream, I don't know, as a kid, maybe you want to be Cinderella, or I don't know, maybe Cinderella.
I have a
maybe you wanna be-
5-year-old, so I get those dreams a lot. for
right?
sure.
You know
Yes.
what I mean? You're thinking, okay, one day I'm going to do that. I was doing this in my mid 30s, right? As a tech executive, people are like, when are you going back to work? And I'm like, huh? What? And quietly, I'm like, I gotta go to Whole Foods and go figure out how I do this, because to just be
And
so
stop
fun.
everyone that's walking around the store. Kara, in reading your book, one of the things that I really loved about you, and I think says a lot about how you've built Hint and where you are today, is that your ability and actually just your resilience of just like going and figuring it out. Like, you weren't waiting, and you like going to Whole
Yeah.
Foods, finding the guy and asking. And I think it was your first job at Time. Like, you went to New York and just said, are you hiring? And like, it's like, who do I need to talk to? Can you give me like the head of HR? Like, and I've seen that like throughout your book, that's kind of a pattern, is that you don't wait for opportunity. Like, you really go seek it out, and you just go to the top.
Yeah, well, I think that the challenge is that people build up these walls to on what the response is going to be, when it's usually not that bad. It could be, and even if it's no, I've always thought, and my dad used to say this to me, what's the worst that can happen, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we need to remind ourselves, especially when things are new or scary, that what is the worst that can happen? And it's usually not that bad. Who cares if they say no? I mean, as I
Right.
share all the time with entrepreneurs, you just keep trying and you go and, pick yourself back up again. Maybe you get your messaging down better. Maybe you have a better whatever the situation is, you just learn from those challenging times. And it ends up that you cannot actually achieve what you want to achieve unless you try. So it's
Mm.
sort of this double-edged sword, because you don't really have a choice if you want to go and succeed. And I think once you get past that fear factor, and that fear could mean, I don't know, how to launch a company. I fear looking stupid, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's
all
like a
those things.
biggie, right?
Hmm.
That you just instead just say, I'm going to go try and see what happens. And if nothing else, I kept thinking, I'm going to be a great guest at a dinner. Like people would be like, wait, you were a tech executive and then you went and launched a beverage company. And then I can explain, okay, yeah, here's what happened. Can you believe it? Right.
Yeah.
And so that that's really, it just makes you, I think, a more interesting human being too. I think that the other thing that really spoke to me a lot as I was thinking about the beverage industry is that when I when I left school, when I left college, I thought I was going to be a journalist, and I was a journalism major, as you mentioned. And that sort of went from print into TV. I was working at CNN. And then when I got to Silicon Valley, I found I landed in tech. It was CD-ROM shopping. It was the early
Yeah.
days of the internet, but it
The
was
old
still,
dial up.
yeah,
Right.
it was still considered tech. And so
Yeah.
everybody, and then we were acquired by America Online, everybody called me a tech executive. And which I was like, okay, I'm a tech executive because I work at these companies, but I didn't define myself as being a tech executive. I defined myself focused and curious and inquisitive and relentless, all of these things.
Yes.
But everybody else said, I'm a tech executive. And so when I was leaving AOL, everybody assumed, including me, that I would go do something else in tech, because here I had two great runs in tech. I was the youngest vice president at America Online, one of the few women at that level. And instead, I thought, how do I take myself down to a level where I'm going to go and learn? Because I felt like,
Mm.
also when I was leaving AOL, I think I couldn't articulate this back then, but when you're in a position where you're managing a bunch of people, you're mentoring and managing, you're not always learning. And I
Sure.
had really I had become bored. I liked the managing and mentoring, but you can't do that 24/7, right? You
Yeah.
have to be
Right.
learning yourself. And that's what happens to so many C-suite executives, is that they get into this, answering to Wall Street, managing lots of people, and then they burn out, they get bored, whatever it is, instead of actually switching industries and going and trying something else. And it just doesn't happen as much as it should, I think. I think
Yeah.
instead, when we feel
People
like
stay where they're at.
when we've maxed out, sometimes you leave and you go to another company. But I guess the really bold thing to do is to just go into an entirely new industry, maybe start your own company in something that you're curious about. Because again, what do you have to lose? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's so powerful. I think someone really needs to hear that right now, because we put all of these barriers in front of us. And I love that question. What's the worst thing that can happen?
yeah,
And we come up with a lot of worse things, though. Like, I'm going to lose my home. I'm going to lose my husband. I'm going to lose my family. But at the end of the day, are you really, and what is it going to cost you, like in your heart and your mind and your soul, to stay where you are? And you say
yeah,
something in the book, Kara, that I really loved. You said, being undaunted doesn't mean you don't have fears. It means understanding what your fears are, deciding when it's important to face up to them, preparing yourself to confront them, and then working through them. So, can you talk? I mean, again, here you are, you're off Diet Coke, you're cutting up slices of fruit in the water, you're like trying to figure out, how do I get this out there? How do I help more people? But you had no experience in the beverage industry, and it's a big industry. You're playing with some big players out there, some big conglomerates, and here you are, like this fiery redhead with this product. How did you overcome, or how did you face your fears when you did have major adversity, because I think it was like the first 6 years before you were seeing
Yeah.
like the Starbucks and all of these other things. And I think so many people give up like right before the miracle. Like they give up before the thing because they do get stuck in fear or scarcity, or it's just not going to work. But we know that building a brand, getting a product out there, it takes time.
It takes time to do it. Well, first of all, I was fortunate in that I had earned some money at America Online. And so I was able to make those decisions. And I always share with people that it's it's important to save money. And if you think you want to go off and do what you really want to do, you need to, set some money aside. I mean, don't be stupid about it, right? Because then that's another worry, trying to figure out how you're going to pay your bills and all of that. But I think that it's just about at that point, then actually figuring out, how do I go out and do this, and taking small steps instead of actually setting up a problem that seems so daunting, seems so large. Even to this day, if I say, oh, I think I'm going to go start a company, that seems, wow, like so large on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Instead, just figure out, how do I get a product on the shelf at Whole Foods? How do I mean, what do I do? I get in my car, I drive to Whole Foods, I see if the manager is there, and then you see what happens. And that's it, right? Don't load your plate with all of the steps. Start with just a couple of steps. And I think what's really important, and particularly for entrepreneurs, as you grow your company, scale your company, is when you overload yourself with so much to do, you really don't get a lot of those things done, and you don't feel very good about yourself.
Isn't
And
that the truth? It's
right.
true. Yeah.
And so you are your worst critic. And so that's where, and everybody is a doubter, right? If people tell you that I don't have any doubts about anything I do, they're lying, right? That
Right.
at some point you have doubts. And I think that and you aren't sure whether or not it's going to work. But as I always remind people, that you won't be able to be successful, and it definitely won't work if you don't actually go and try. And you may learn new things along the way that you didn't anticipate, even when you were having these doubts. But you have to push through the doubts. And I think the best way to do it is just think about, how can I get some wins under my belt? What are the couple of steps? Like, can I go start the car? Yep, you can go do that. Okay, that was good.
Check.
I did.
Yes.
Right. I did that for
Yeah.
my Monday morning.
Right.
And I could go do that. And I think that stuff is really, it is really, really valuable to remember, because when you're having those dark days, when you get kicked out of Starbucks, as we did, not personally, but my product got kicked out of Starbucks, those are dark days, right? You just think, oh my God, why is this happening? And I think what I set up in the book as well is that it doesn't mean that those things don't affect me. And right, they hurt, right? But instead, when you have enough of these challenging times that you get through, you naturally start to remember them when you are plunked into another one. So how many people are thinking about the pandemic over the last year? And when that hit, I was actually extremely zen. Maybe, like, to some people, they just said, how you've got
What's wrong with you, Keri?
both offices on both coasts closing down. You've got 15% of your business in corporations going away. But I think that the other thing, what it teaches you, is that if you have options along the way, I always had an option to go back to being a tech executive, right? In my personal life, I could go do that. I could quit. I always had options in that. In my business life, when the pandemic hit, when we were looking at our business, we didn't have all our eggs in one basket, right? We were, we had the option to, because we had a direct to consumer business going, and we also had retail. And so we decided to really put the gas on the direct to consumer business at that point. And I think that, again, when you have options, it really boils down to that.
Yeah.
Then, and you really force yourself to kind of say, what could we do instead of freezing? Because complacency is never the best option.
No, it's
It
not.
really
And I
isn't.
think that's important as you're looking at growing your brand and your business and you're becoming more visible. It's we talk about that all the time within my company because so much of what we do is online and we use, the social media platforms that we have. And I'm constantly saying we cannot put all of our eggs in the Facebook basket or on Instagram or at live events. And for us, Kara, like 2020 was the best year we ever had because
It's
we were
awesome.
able to shift, but you had built out your e-commerce business before this. And I think
Yeah,
it's really important that as you're building your business, you're thinking of how can I diversify? How can I, so I'm not reliant
totally.
on just one, way of making money. But I want to go back to that Starbucks. I was reading in the book about your first meeting with the buyer when they were interested in your children's pack, right? And they told you not to bring samples. Like, don't bring samples. And I think it was Theo, your husband, that was like, "What? Are you crazy?" Tell us that story because I think that's most people would be like, "I'm not going to bring samples." Like that would be crazy.
Yeah.
But
Well, it is pretty crazy, and it just speaks to how vulnerable you are when you walk into a new industry, frankly. And again, so many lessons I think from that you even think of in your own life, that you stop almost thinking for yourself when you're mesmerized by something that you want. I guess,
Starbucks.
right?
Yes.
I wanted Starbucks. I wanted
6,700 Starbucks was the vision, I
I
think you
know.
said.
And I
Yeah.
wanted that so bad. And I was like, okay, I'll just go to the meeting, no samples. I mean, it was just crazy. And that's when we stopped at Whole Foods and picked up a few bottles, and I put them in my bag, and then just walked in with the bottle. I figured if they really made a huge deal, I'd just be drinking it. I mean, why I couldn't,
So you
but
walked in with like the bottle in your hand?
mhm, I did.
It
And
wasn't even like incognito in the purse. She's like, I'm
no,
walking in with the bottle in my hand.
yeah, and I'm drinking it, and I
Right.
happen to have, luckily, a couple of extra bottles in my purse
Just by
because she said,
happenstance. Right.
"Oh," the same person who told me not to have samples, she said, "Oh my God, that looks so good. Do you have an extra bottle?" And I thought, "Is this a trick question?" And I said, "I do actually." And but
Just
you know,
happened
it
to.
it also, I mean, it's kind of funny to think about it. It also just goes to show you people say things, and I mean, why would she say that? Right. And people
Yeah.
say things, and sometimes you just have to do what makes sense for you.
I feel like it's
Right.
almost a control thing, at that point,
Totally. I
you
mean,
know.
it's just a bizarre thing. And again, that was a story where, ultimately I'm so happy we had the samples there, because they didn't even want to talk about the kids boxes. They decided that they would put the bottle into all of their locations until they
Because
stopped
you
putting it
brought
in,
your sample, right?
because I
So,
brought the sample.
yeah,
Exactly. And
yeah.
but
So it's like
again,
also trust yourself. Like you got to trust your intuition, trust your gut. If you know something's right, regardless, do you, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And if she was going to hold it against me for actually bringing a bottle with me to that meeting, then I mean, I wasn't forcing her to drink it, but why should she be able to tell me not to bring a bottle into the meeting? It's just bizarre. But
Yeah.
again, when you really want something on the other side of the table, it's amazing, especially as you're building your business and you're vulnerable and you're thinking, everybody knows so much more than me. I'll just do whatever they say. And
Yeah.
usually when that happens, when you are uh, basically not acting as you should because of fear, right? That's what it really boils down to. That's when things get really
Messy.
dicey for you. It
Yeah.
does. And
Yep.
it never really ends up, that great. I mean, we had another situation years later where a major retailer was asking us to give them product during a time in our history, 2008, 2009, when the financial markets were shutting down,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a very scary time. We almost closed hint. And we were only a few years into the life of our company, and it was really bad. And we had a major retailer say, hey, if you want to stay in our stores, you need to give us the product. And I said, I don't know if I really understand what you mean. Give you the product? I mean, I
Like
know what
give
the
it to
word
them.
give
Right.
means, but you
Like, let me
can't
get clear.
really, yeah, you can't really mean that. And they said, oh no, that is what we mean, because we need to stay in business. And I thought, well, and I said, how am I
Was this
going to
like the
stay?
buy one, get one offer?
Yeah. And I said,
Yeah.
how am
You're
I
like,
going to stay in business? And they said, well, if we don't stay in business, then you're probably not in business. And I thought, oh, well, that's a bad situation. First of all, they're going to make the money I'm not. But in addition to that, they know that they have me by the throat.
yeah.
Right. There's so many factors in that story. And I just decided that I needed to find other places to sell my product to, because I didn't like what I was seeing, frankly, out of this conversation. But I also know that if you don't like the way you're being treated, then you leave,
Yeah.
right? We live in a free, right? You just don't, I mean,
But we get so scared, right? We get so
so
stuck in
scared.
scarcity, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do without this major retailer? They know more than I know. You know, are they going to blackmail me and other things, or what else can they do? But I love how Keri, you trusted your gut on this, and you're like, you know what? That just doesn't feel good. That's not good for me. It's not good for them. Where maybe someone else would have said, okay, like I need to do whatever to keep the client.
And they
And you,
did. And
yeah,
those companies that basically couldn't believe that we had said no, they are out of business
wow,
today. And so again, it was business common sense, but also business 101 that we were following. And sometimes it really takes courage to do that, especially when
for
everybody
sure.
around you is like, whoa, that was a bad
And
decision.
you're the new kid on the block, you know,
Totally.
and you're like,
And
oh my gosh, you know?
but I believed, I mean, there's so many lessons in there too, including the fact that I knew that more than likely they were going to kick us out. They didn't kick us out, by the way, but they were going to kick us out, and I could grow the company slower. And so this is something that I always share with people, that when you're building a company, you think, I got to go fast. I got to, you know, move really, really fast, especially in Silicon Valley where I am. Everybody's like, we got to move fast. It is so rare that you really do need to move fast.
Yeah.
I
We put
mean,
that pressure on ourselves.
we
Yeah.
100% put it on ourselves, yet it really is about quality product and having enough money to stay alive, right? And that's really what makes a company, and people,
And
and right,
people.
and
Yeah.
people. And it is not really about how fast you went, because you can see that if you develop a product, you have a great team, you have enough money in the bank to actually pay that team, all of those things, way more important than you being, first, or and that was really the business kind of common sense that I thought about. It's better to actually have a business than go broke, right?
I would agree. And yet
And
sometimes we just get caught up in the comparison, you know, in the analyzing what everyone else is doing and thinking, oh my God, I'm not big enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not good enough yet. And then I think you make costly decisions, and sometimes you make poor decisions for the company because you're trying to get somewhere so much quicker without doing the R&D and the
yeah,
research and making sure you have the right team and the quality product and all of those things too. So that's really great advice.
and it really, I mean, it's funny. I've never sort of looked at it this way, but it's kind of like as kids, when if you're not in the popular group and you get a chance to hang out in the popular group, you'll do anything, right? And to do that,
Yeah.
yet is that really the right thing to be doing? And
Is that
then
really where you want to be?
is that
Yeah.
really where you want to be? And it kind of,
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of the same kind of thinking in business that we carry that on. We get mesmerized by, the reach goal, that they're paying attention to me. Unfortunately, what often happens in that situation too is that you do put all your eggs in that basket, and you
Yeah.
do put all your attention in that direction. And it's rarely the right thing to do.
Yeah. You talked about people. I think one of the most important aspects to growing any business is who you surround yourself with
Hmm.
and your team. But you've had someone with you from the very beginning who was filling that Jeep and bringing it to all the stores, and that's your husband,
Yes.
Theo. So many now women-owned businesses, their husbands are actually coming on as partners and joining them. Tell us what that journey has been like for you. Did it at sometimes just cause too much stress? Do you feel like it was the perfect like marriage made in heaven? Like I want to hear some real stuff about what it's been like, growing and owning a business with your husband. And now you have these 4 kids. And I love that. I think I read something that your son was saying, I didn't realize that females weren't CEOs. And I mean, think about that legacy. Think about what you've instilled in them by just doing
Hmm.
helping him see, a way of being that, most people may or may not understand. So,
Yeah, I mean, he had a similar to me. I mean, he had another career and we never worked together. We never planned on working together. And he was an attorney, and here I come to him, and I had made some money at AOL. So I was just telling him, I wasn't asking for permission. I was telling him what I was doing, that I was going to start this idea. And I shared with him that I was going to start this company, and the name of the company was Wawa. And that's when he kind of engaged a little bit, because he thought,
like, huh? Yeah.
she's from the West Coast, they don't have Wawas out there, so she probably doesn't know. But he's like, don't do that, because that could be really bad, and they could crush you like a bug if you end up becoming successful. So that was, I think, his first point of trying to convince me not to do this. And then when I finally shared with them the word hint literally in that
Loved
conversation,
it. So
not
great.
not even knowing what I was doing, that's when uh, he said, it's a 4-letter word. There's no way you're going to get it trademarked. And I did not like him that day at all, because I was, he poo-pooed my Wawa name. And now he was saying hint wasn't going to get trademarked. And so then I shared with him that I was pregnant with our 4th. And he said, oh my God, what are you doing? You're off the rails. And I said, no, it's all going to be great. I'm going to get it on the shelf before our son is born. He said, our son, how pregnant are you? I said, well, we have like 6 months, and then, and it'll all work out great. He said, you have no idea what you're doing. And I
And
said,
sometimes that is the best. Not knowing, I think
not
sometimes can be
knowing.
the
Yeah.
best. Yes.
And so I mean, it was funny because I had found this bottling plant in Chicago, and I said, will you come with me? He said, you've already made plane reservations. And I said, well, not for you, but I mean, it'd be great if you come, because I'm getting morning sick. And so I mean, he's like, just kind of catching up to where I had been for a few weeks. And that's when he said, sure, I'll go. And it was at that moment when he really saw the bottles kind of coming off the line, that he really understood. First of all, I had been working in bits and bytes for many, many years, and he loved it. First of all, he loved that I was happy, right? That I was really
Yeah.
excited and I was using my curiosity. But in addition, and he had seen this problem that I had solved for myself around getting me to drink water, but he also saw that the bigger purpose in it. And when I said to him that I'm not just doing it because I can hold on to it, I mean, that's part of it. But for me, I loved the idea of being able to help people. And I thought that, and I encourage people today. I mean, there's so many different entrepreneurs and ways to become an entrepreneur, but I think that if you can actually help people, and you
Yeah.
hear that from them, that you're helping people in some way, that that is a really powerful thing, especially when you can't get a meeting with the buyer, your product, has a problem with it, that you keep thinking you're working for your customer, right? You're working towards the goal of of helping them, not only helping them in our case, but helping them get healthier. And I think if
Yeah,
there's anything good that came out of the pandemic, it's that people are taking their health way more
for
seriously.
sure. Yeah.
And right. And I think that 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 was really what drove me. It was the curiosity of trying to figure out this whole industry. And some of it, as I share in the book, is just you can't make this up. Some of these stories. I mean, we had
It's actually so good. It was really great. And I wish we had time like to go
yeah.
through all of them, but that's why you have to go get the book. You have to go get
Yay.
Undaunted in your hands or listen to it when you're walking. It's just really wonderful. There's so many great stories and it's just really beautiful to see, what you and Theo have created together, the 4 children and the lifestyle you're able to create for them. And I work with a lot of startup entrepreneurs, Kara, and they say, you know what? My husband won't let me or my wife won't let me. And I just am like, oh my gosh, it kills me. And one of the things I tell them is, look, you're not there to ask for permission. You're there to help them see your vision. And when you can get someone to believe in your vision, when you can paint the picture for them, when they can see your excitement and you're curious. I mean, all that we want for our partners is for them to be happy. And yet, come on, we all live in fear sometimes. And like you're going to go quit your job, or I mean, great that you had, the severance from AOL, but I see that so much that
Yeah.
there's like, oh, he won't let me or she won't let me. And so I love that story because you really had to help him see the vision. And when he saw the bottle and he started getting into it, he's like, honey, I'm with you. Let's do this. And he just seems like
Well,
such a great guy and he's really been there for you.
yeah, totally. And but again, like wasn't, I mean, he wasn't like, I'm all in the beginning. I think what he saw was this bigger purpose, right?
Yeah.
And how, and to your point about the curiosity too, but it was at that point too, where, I mean, another thing that I share with entrepreneurs, if you're trying to find a partner, it might be your husband, it might be your friend, but your, friend from school or wherever. But I think that the most important thing is to have different skill sets. And that's what we saw
Mm.
very early on. As they say, opposites attract. I mean,
Yeah.
we are very yin and yang, and we've been married 26 years. I mean, it's just, we're very, we inspire each other and the stuff that we can do. Whereas, some of the stuff that he does really well, I find it's not that I can't do it, I find it harder. And then
Yeah.
the same with what I do. And so he would just hear me think about it and he's like, oh, I never really thought about that. And so we didn't even think about working together ever. Like, people are like, did you always want to start a business? And that might be the case for many, many people, but for him, I think he found, maybe in some ways a colleague that he really wanted to work with, that he was
Yeah.
satisfied his curiosity. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think that the other piece of it too is that I don't think he would start a company, at least 16 years ago. I don't think he would have taken the risk. He was the person that would put the walls up,
Yeah.
very accomplished. He would not do it. But I was the person that said, we just have to go do these couple of steps. We just have to go do this.
Couple
And
steps at a time.
right. And
Yes.
just keep. And so I was really the coach, right? And kind of
Yeah.
saying, let's go do this. And then he would say, here's how to do it. And I
Mm.
trusted him so much. So that allowed me to not be defensive about, no, I'm going in this direction. Instead, I'd be like, really, you think so? Huh? That's interesting. Right. Because I
Yeah.
think that that is really what is needed, in a partner. And so I guess the
Well,
the
I think
net,
different perspectives are so important in building
so
your
important. And
business.
it's,
Yeah.
and again, if you're both leading lives of being, wanting, that you're curious, which he has always been, but I don't think, as he says, Kara has always lived with one foot off a cliff. And I have, I'm
You
always
have.
been that,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that you can't teach that,
Mm.
and I think today he's all about, I mean, he lives a life of trying every single day and being curious about
Yeah.
things. I mean, he's working on a huge initiative around supply chain right now on getting rid of boxes. I mean, he believes that last mile delivery and being able to get
Yeah.
people like, and again, no one's talking about that kind of stuff. And that is,
I think about it all the time with every Amazon order that I
yeah,
have, quite
right.
frankly.
But
I mean,
again, is that risky what he's doing?
yeah.
I don't know. Like he just figures it as 2.0 of where the world is going because he understands the customer. That kind of stuff, if it was just a company many, many years ago, he might not have actually gone. I don't think he would have done it. But today, I think he starts to think, how do I just go do this? And he's kind of
So you both
demystified.
really support each other. Like you've helped him and he's helped you. And, you were talking about living with one foot off the ledge. And in the book, you equate entrepreneurship to hiking the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about that.
I think that when you put yourself into situations where you're going to go and learn something and maybe tackle a fear that you have, it can be in your personal life and it can be in your professional life. And I think those go hand in hand in this case, that they just add up in the end to things that you've gotten through. And so for me, I've always been afraid of heights. And I remember the first time I grew up in Arizona, the first time I was really afraid of heights was when I went to the Grand Canyon. I remember just being terrified. And I thought, I'm going to go back and hike the Grand Canyon. There were a lot of people around me who thought, that is not what I would do if I was afraid of heights. And I said,
Right.
no, I'm going to go do it. And I'm going to plan it. And I'm going to get my team together. Whoever wants to go with me can come. And a couple of days before I was leaving, I remember being at a soccer game and somebody said, aren't you really afraid of heights? And I said, yeah, but I've trained and I'm good. And she said, but what happens when you get to the canyon and then you look down? And I said, I had this vision all of a sudden where I was almost nauseous just thinking about it. And so I thought, how can I get through? What can I do? Because I cannot cancel this trip at this point. There's all these people who are.
But I also find it interesting, Kara, how she brought that up to you. Like how people next to you are going to be like, well, how are you going to do
Totally.
that?
And
Like,
she
let's bring
didn't.
up the worst case scenario. You're scared, right? Like instead of being like, good for you, go for it. You can
Yeah,
do it,
she
right?
planted that, right? But also I was, it was like, she drops this bomb on me, right?
Yeah.
I don't even think she knew she dropped that bomb on me. She was just asking a question, right? But yet it's the power of words, I guess, is something that is, so anyway, it got me thinking. And so I called everybody who was going with me to the Grand Canyon and I said, okay, I can still go. I'm not bailing, but there is a condition. We have to start at 4:00 in the morning. And so they said, okay, fine. We'll start at 4 a.m., whatever. We'll get down. It'll be cooler going down. I had all these reasons why. So I sold them this idea. And so we're going down. There's less people. It's all great. And then as we're getting down to the bottom of the canyon, that's when something happened that I didn't anticipate. My sister and I were walking together and a herd of goats jumped over our head and almost killed us. I mean, it was insane on so many levels. And again, we had researched it. We had done all the work. We had, figured it out. And we were laughing.
Was not planning for the herd of goats.
No, we were laughing hysterically. We were planning our eulogy and we said, wouldn't that just be so poor, sisters? They were going down. I mean, it wasn't
at the Grand
funny,
Canyon,
but it was so funny because we thought we had the headlamp, we had an extra set of batteries. I mean, we had the water. We were like, and then this happened. And I thought, wow, but it didn't. Right. And it didn't happen. And so then we kept going and I won't give away all the stories, but there were so many instances along the way. And what was so fascinating is it's a story of sometimes things happen along the way you have no control over, and you just have to roll with it and do the best you can. Right. And kind of just thank God that it didn't affect you worse. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where you are going to be challenged by things. And what was so interesting in this case where I ran into a rattlesnake, I remembered all these things that people had told me along the way, like step back a certain number of feet, um, wait, wait it out for a few minutes and never turn your back. All of these things would come up in my head as I'm going through these challenging times. And then I did those steps, and it was almost automatic that they were rolling by in my head. I did those steps, and then the snake finally went away. But again, the more of those challenging times that you kind of put yourself through, I was scared going in there. I was even more scared at certain points along the way, but
Yeah.
I got through. And so
Yeah.
when you look back on those
So powerful.
times,
Yeah.
and then that's where A, you learn, but also B, you remember how you felt going in and what you accomplished. I walked out of there exhausted, you know, 22-ish miles in one day. It was insane. But it was also, I was really proud. Right. And I'm still really proud about it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a major accomplishment. Am I still afraid of heights? I am. Am I better? Yeah. I mean, and I think that again, it makes the more things that you do that maybe you're uncomfortable, you aren't sure you're going to be able to accomplish it. I mean, use it in everyday life as,
Yeah.
maybe this is what I need to do. I need to set a goal. I need to go for that, and be open to knowing that it may not end up exactly how you thought it was going to end up, but you'll
Yeah.
get through it because you've
Yeah.
done a lot of really hard things and you have that resilience.
You do. We do. And it's like that preparation meets opportunity. Like I just think of that snake and you're like, okay, this is what I've been told. I listened and I am now going to put that into action. Right.
Yeah.
So, we all have this constant input that's coming in. And I think sometimes life experiences show up to test that input and just to trust yourself. And I love that story because, you get down to the bottom of the canyon and you probably look up and like, oh my gosh, look at what I accomplished. And yet you still have to go back up. And I feel like that's kind of entrepreneurship every day. There's such peaks and valleys and yet, every step is just another step in the direction you're supposed to go. Good or bad, I would think,
No, it's totally true. And what's so interesting, somebody from the trip actually wanted me to go and do another one just a couple months ago, and it was actually in Africa. And so I said, I don't think we can go to Africa right now. But it was definitely, I mean, I think more than anything, when you go through those challenging times, and especially with other people
Yeah.
too, that they still want you on the team, right? They still,
Yeah.
he was like,
If
I'll
anything,
do.
I think it makes the team stronger.
Totally. He's like, I'll do
Yeah.
whatever if you need to start at 4 o'clock in the morning again. Like he
Oh, that's
remembers all
so
my
great.
crazy, right? But again, I think it's just that stuff it just makes you, as I said earlier, a more interesting person too, that, again, that you accomplish something, but take
Yeah.
time to really remember those things that you did as well.
Yep. Celebrate the wins. Kara, I end every interview asking my guest, what does inspired living mean to you?
I think inspired living means knowing that you are not going to do the same thing every single day, that you're going to challenge yourself. You are going to put hard into your life and not wait for it either.
Yes.
I think that is super, super important. And really be a lifelong learner, that you're going to be able to do things again that you didn't necessarily think that you were going to be able to do. But I'll add one thing to it: by sharing your own stories of how you weathered a storm, how achieved whatever you accomplished that you didn't think that you were going to be able to, that will actually inspire others to live too.
Yes. So beautiful. I always say people buy people, not brands. And I think one of the reasons why Hint is so successful is because of the woman behind it, the story you continue to share. People can relate to your story. They see themselves in your story. And thank you for sharing your story
Oh, so
today.
nice.
Thank you for the book. And I have to say again, for a woman who does not have space, I will say I have space. I have not created a lot of space in my life to read. This book has been so wonderful to sit down and read. And I loved all the stories. So I know they can get it everywhere. There's a particular place, Kara, that they can get Undaunted right now.
Bookstores everywhere, Amazon, Audible as well. I read my own book, so you get
So nice.
to
I love that. You get to really hear the author's voice, which I think is great.
yeah, it was a great experience actually. And yeah, so it'd be great to hear from you too. I'm on social, all over social at Kara Goldin with an I, and hopefully you'll get a chance to read the book and pick up a case of hint along the way too.
And we didn't get time to talk about it, but I do want to say too, first of all, I'm obsessed with Hint. I love it. But also the sunscreen is just, I can't stop smelling the pineapple and it's amazing. So
it is
another
product.
talk, but we talk so much too about when you get known for one thing, then you can diversify into other things. Kara, that's going to be podcast Inspired Living interview number 2.
I love it.
Congratulations on your success for doing something that makes you feel good, that helps others feel good, and really creates inspired living. So I appreciate you, Kara.
Thank you so much.
You've just heard another uplifting episode of Inspired Living with Keri Murphy, the podcast. I hope you loved it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you'd like to know more about Inspired Living or to get your hands on many of our awesome free resources, such as the Be Studio Ready Guide, simply visit us at inspiredliving.tv/podcast. Remember, your vision is your destiny, and we're here to help you bring it to life. Join me again next week for another extraordinary episode.